Hi, I'm Jen Johnson, and I'm in the Genesee Valley Hand Spinners Guild sheep study. And I've chosen to journal it via video and share it with you guys all here on YouTube. The breed that we're working on right now is Polypay, and I'm very fortunate to have Anne Sammons here, who is a Polypay breeder and also a fiber enthusiast. So we're going to have a nice conversation. Welcome, Anne.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So the first thing I wanted to do was talk about your farm. How did you guys get started? What's the story of the Polypay, and just kind of explain your journey.
Sure, I would love to. So about 25 years ago, we've been raising polypays for almost 25 years now. When we first bought our farm, my husband was interested in raising hogs, but he was also interested in raising sheep because if you know anything about hogs, they're really hard on buildings, and of course they smell. Sorry to all the pig breeders out there that may be listening. But we researched, or he researched actually, the different breeds that would be great for production. We started off as a production farm, and actually we still are a production farm. And the
What does
wool
that
is
mean
just,
exactly when you say a
to me,
production?
that means, so in the Midwest, we are from Geneseo, Illinois, and in the Midwest, the farms can be huge and the livestock operations can be huge. And we at one time ran about 200 sheep, but we started off at 10 head. And when we say production, we mean that we're raising animals for market and animals for breeding stock. And when we first started raising sheep, we weren't really even considering raising animals for wool. That only came about 10 years ago when I became interested in learning how to spin.
Okay.
Okay, and honestly, quite honestly, the Polypay breed wasn't what drew me to learning how to spin. We also raise Rambouillets and Columbias and natural coloreds with Rambouillet and Columbia genetics, and I just recently acquired a smaller flock of Merinos. I got that as a Christmas present, which was kind of fun.
That's great.
Yeah, but so we started off with about 12 to 13 head of sheep out of, gosh, where did our first flock come from? Nebraska?
Nebraska, I think I read
Western Nebraska, right. You know the story better than me. And then we were really fortunate to have the National Polypay Show held in Springfield, Illinois, which is only 3 hours away from us. And so we, trucked our family down and we bought our first ram and a couple more ewes. And so our flock grew to about 20 that year. And then, just over time, we retained more ewes and sold sheep at the national show and sold, breeding stock. We'd have a trailer full of animals leave the farm, and we thought that that was pretty cool. And of course, the sending sheep to market, that was part of the production. But then about 10 years ago, I mentioned to my husband that I really thought that these brown sheep at the national show were beautiful, and that kind of opened the door for him to start buying a new breed. And but it also brought me more into the farm, the chores, and raising the animals. Up until that point, I was so busy raising kids that he did the chores and I did the kids. So
Same with us.
yeah. And then, so then just over time, getting more into other breeds and learning more about wool. And then finally, and this is, I've told this story to a couple different people and they just kind of chuckle at me, but our shearer said that our wool was worth nothing. And it kind of made me mad because our wool is beautiful. And what he really meant was the brown wool. The brown wool was worth nothing. And
Right.
so, he would rather compost it than take it to the local wool pool, which is in Northern Illinois. And so that motivated me to learn to spin, learn to do something with our
Good for
fiber.
you.
And so, yeah. And then, over time, of course, I processed Polypay too, because it is a really neat combination breed. In addition to being, a great production breed for raising lots of babies, it has beautiful wool too. So that's kind of our journey.
Wonderful. I'd like to hear your fiber journey. And I'll give you mine as an example of what I find interesting about people, what brings them to me today, how do we come together. So I started knitting in the 4th grade. I joined 4-H. My mother and my grandmother both knit. My mom bought me one ewe at an auction when I was maybe in 6th grade.
Okay.
Did not spin her wool or anything. She was just a pet, but that was always kind of, informing me as I went forward. Stopped knitting after I had my first child in my mid to late 20s. Then we got sheep about a year after the first kid was born. And maybe 3 years after that, I started spinning with a drop spindle, spinning with the wheel, picked up knitting again. So that's 20 years ago. And now I'm all in, spinning, knitting, learning to weave, hopefully here soon, a crocheter.
Right.
But my origin started as a knitter, and now I'm identifying, if I had to select one, I'm identifying as a farmer.
Okay. All right. Well, as for me, my fiber art journey started about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, at the time frame in which the shearer said your wool's worth nothing. We were so focused on raising our family and taking them to their events and being involved in their rearing that there's really very little time. And I also work off the farm, so there's very little time for any sort of me activities. But I took a spinning class. I did not learn to drop spindle first. I learned to wheel spin. I took a class. I found a class about 2 hours away, and the woman that taught me how to spin really had to coax me to get there. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can go. I don't know if I can leave the farm. I can't, be gone 6 Saturdays in a row. That's just too much when I have 5 boys at home and, we're too busy. But I did it, and it was probably the best thing I've ever done. At some point, parents, moms, dads, kind of have to regain their own identity. You're a parent, you're busy raising kids. And I feel like that was kind of like a milestone of, all right, this is who I am. But I grew up in town. My husband's a farmer, and I grew up in town. And so I really have no, although I want to back up there. My dad grew up on a farm. Yep. My dad grew up on a farm. So we at least visited a farm growing up. We live in a small town where we're surrounded by farms. So I do have that background and that knowledge. And so, but not as a farmer, not as a shepherd. I don't have.
Well, you probably went to school with other children that were farmers' children, right? I mean,
we were friends. We'd go play, or I'd go to my grandma's and we'd play in the corn crib. We'd watch her process chickens, that kind of experience. But really, nothing too centrally focused on not my core. That's not my core. But anyhow, the last. After learning to spin, what are you going to do with all the yarn? Well, okay, now I'll learn to weave. And so I weave on a rigid heddle loom, and I actually teach classes of how to weave.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. And then I also like to dye our own fiber, and I'm trying as hard as I can to learn how to naturally dye. I do not crochet. I do not knit, although I wish someday that I will learn that too. Just because, you see all these beautiful patterns and you think, wow, I wish I could make that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll get there. How great.
Yeah. I don't hand process. Everything goes to the mill simply because I'm so busy with other things. We still have a 14-year-old at home.
Oh.
I do all the chores with my husband now. I drive the tractor when we're baling. So, I still have a full-time job.
Right.
So
you're busy. You're a busy lady. You're a finger in everything.
I am.
Awesome.
But that is my story. I started off just by admiring the wool, and then I took it from there.
All from an aside comment from your shearer. I think that's awesome.
Yes, he kind of made me mad. I said, I'm going to show you.
Oh, boy. Oh, okay. Well, all right. So I will tell you, I had a very, very similar experience, which launched us into breeding for the fine fleece Shetlands.
Okay.
If you're not familiar with the Shetland breed, there's a very wide variety of fiber quality because the original importation of animals that came over from the Shetland Islands had a lot of crossing in their background. And so there's a lot of stuff that pops out, but it's still registered as Shetland. So hand spinners will buy Shetland wool today, and it can be very coarse and very long and hairy, or super crimpy fine, which is what we're breeding for and selecting.
Okay. That's nice. I have spun Shetland, and it was probably more along the line of the coarse.
Okay.
But I love all of the different shades of brown and gray and black in Shetland, and that's probably what drew me to our natural coloreds.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yes.
So I was at a festival once early on in our breeding when we were still breeding for we didn't deliberately breed for it, but it's what we were getting as a product was coarser fiber. And a woman very casually walked by and like put her hand on a little pile of my fiber and just went, ugh, I can't stand how itchy it is. It's just awful. And it just made me sick to my stomach, kind of similar, I think, to your reaction. And from that moment on, we started pursuing genetics for the Shetland. We learned about the fact that they existed and then started pursuing that. But again, it was just I don't even know who the woman is. She's out there and she changed my trajectory.
What an impact. Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, woman who did not compliment my wool or
exactly. I'm getting kind of
criticized it otherwise.
All right. It was an emotional response to that. All right. So how did you get introduced to the breed itself? Did you already go into that at all? Is there a story there?
It was just the research that my husband did to find a production breed, a breed that could have multiple lambings in less time. Typically, twins are better, they're good milkers, they're good mothers, they're wonderful mothers. And so that's what he was looking for, a medium-sized animal. So our breed, now I watched your YouTube introduction to your vlog, and you were introducing the Polypay breed in that particular conversation. And our animals can have 3 lambings in 2 years. So you were commenting on how they could have 3 lambings in 1 year. They can lamb more frequently because they mature faster, but not that fast, not at that rate.
Okay, good. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Their gestation period is the same as all sheep, but the animals can mature faster, and then their rate of recovery after the babies. We've had animals get bred while they're still nursing. Not that we really wanted that. You got to give the moms a break, but that happens.
Wow.
Fence jumpers happen. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they're very resourceful that way. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the wool then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this is a staple from the washed Polypay fleece that I got from the guild.
Okay.
And the women that are running this sheep study are putting a ton of effort into this, and they write up these really nice little summaries of the breed, and then they're giving us all 1 ounce or 1.5 ounce bags. So this is a wash block. It's about 4 inches. And I just would like you to just like when you think about wool from a Polypay sheep,
so that spring that you get, that is so typical.
Okay.
They have such bouncy fiber. And, you mentioned in your introduction, Polypay is 4 breeds, Targhee, Rambouillet, Dorset, and Finn. And so, they get the lots of lambs from the Finn, and they get that springy wool from the Dorset.
Okay.
Yeah, that is very typical of what we see. And I'll also comment that because the breed is a compilation of 4 different breeds, one flock may have wool that is more like the Rambouillet breed. Soft,
I would expect that.
silky. And then another flock might have wool that's more Dorset-like, and some may have more Finn. And that's typical too of the way in which the animals present themselves. You can, when I think of Dorsets, they look alike to me.
Mm.
But when I see Polypay flocks across the country, they don't all look alike, and some are bigger and some are smaller. Um,
But the breeders are selecting for those traits, the mothering traits and the
yes,
prolificacy traits.
yes,
So
and the
that's
milking
the
traits.
core thing
Hmm.
that makes it a polypay. That's what I learned from my discussion with Mark,
Yes,
was that
yes,
that's the
true.
focus. And so if there's
Yes.
other traits that maybe are more concentrating towards another breed, that's acceptable within the
Hmm.
polypay breeding community, as long as you're getting, high
Hmm.
rates of triplets, right?
Yes.
And all, good mothering, lots of milk.
Right. Yes. Yes. And triplets are okay. We prefer twins, of course, since, it's a little bit harder to feed the third, but the moms can do it.
Hmm.
They are heavy enough milkers that they can do it.
Hmm.
We've had
Right.
one set of quads.
Oh my gosh.
That was hard. They were little. We pulled two, or maybe we pulled one. I don't quite remember. That was a good 4 or 5 years ago.
And when you say that,
Um,
you mean that lamb was a bottle lamb, full
yes,
bottle
that
lamb.
lamb became a full-time bottle lamb, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Four babies. Now I understand that Finn, that's expected, or that happens quite a bit with Finn, but it's just nice to be able to pull one or two and um, let the other two have a better shot.
We have the same philosophy. There's some Shetland breeders that'll end up getting triplets, and it just stresses me out, the very idea. We had one ewe gave us triplets one year, and she did fine, but still, you're always like on alert with that particular little
Hmm.
family.
Right, right.
So you really don't have a standard for polypay wool because that's not the focus. But
I would say you're probably correct there.
you have a focus of wool. So I mean,
I do.
what are you trying to get with your polypays? What's your goal?
Well, what I love is that their staple length is fairly long. We
Mm.
can get, 3.5 to 4 inch staple length. And to me, that's pretty important because that's what the mill wants for yarn.
Mm.
If I send off a 20-pound bag of wool, it better have a long enough staple or they can't make yarn with it.
Mhm.
And I can count on that.
Mhm.
That I do love the crimp of Polypay, but the crimp is not consistent from animal to animal, not
Mhm.
at all.
Not
Yeah.
even within your flock.
Within our flock, it's pretty good, but
Mhm.
like the older moms, their staple length isn't as long. And this is processed fiber. This is not raw fleece, but their staple length isn't as long, and their crimp may not be the same.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
But you have a type that you like. Um, so
Yep.
if I'm a hand spinner and I want to buy a polypay fleece,
Hmm.
um, what would your advice be to her? How would you advise her to source a polypay fleece to get a good example or something?
Um, Gosh, that's a good question. Do you coat your sheep?
Yeah.
You do. Okay.
Yeah.
We have a pretty big flock, and not huge, not like that 200 number that I gave you earlier.
Mm.
So we don't coat our sheep. Our merino ram that we just bought is coated, and I'm considering coating the merinos. I just haven't decided because we run our animals in the pasture, their feedlot, they're far and wide. So what I would look for is a 3.5 to 4 inch staples, maybe three.
Hmm.
Of course, you're going to look for. You showed me that washed, and it's a little bit yellowed, and I would say that's probably the lanolin. Would you? Would
Hmm.
you? Okay.
Because it's
And
supposed to be like a crispy bright white, like a blue white color, maybe more.
mine will get white, and my lanolin yellow is not that yellow. But then again, that also is a variance between, I would say, Polypay.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
And that's perfectly fine. I mean, I
yeah.
find that really interesting because in the Shetland community, especially in the fine fleece Shetland breeder community,
Hmm.
we actually have a performance standard. And if you don't hit the wool standard, certain crimps per inch, certain micron count,
Okay.
you can't register
Okay.
that animal in that
Okay.
smaller group, right? So
Right.
it's so
Right.
interesting to me. how it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and most of our animals can give us 6 to 7 pounds of wool.
Oh, okay.
Now, in terms of clean, that's total. And, in terms of clean, probably about half of that because, you're going to skirt off the dirty, of course.
Right. That's interesting though, 6 to 7 pounds of fleece. That's now one of the things I read, I think it was in that book, the Deb Robson, the source book where she goes to all the different farms in the States and
Yes.
stuff. And she talked about, I believe it was in there, that they talked about one of the other things about the Polypay breed is, because it is so focused on commercial goals,
Mm-hmm.
that the wool, let me see if I can say this correctly, that one of the goals with the Polypay breeders is to have wool that does not have a lot of shrinkage. So like you send in a certain amount of weight and you get 20% of that back. Whereas for me, I'm getting like, 40 to 50% back.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking about there in terms of
Yeah, I do.
yield, I
And
guess?
when I send, so when I skirt, I skirt pretty heavily before I send wool to the mill. And I probably skirt off about 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the fleece is returned or the processed fibers returned from the mill, I want to take that back. I don't skirt off 50%. I'll take off the back and I'll take around the edges. But then there's not much lanolin loss.
That's
It's
what I
not.
understood when I read it, and I was sensitive to that when I was observing the raw fleece. It felt kind of crunchy and not in a bad way. It just didn't feel like it was really soaked with grease, right? It felt fairly
Um,
dry and kind of, I don't know, it didn't really feel like I was holding a really dirty, greasy fleece.
yeah, it's not nearly as dirty and greasy as our Rambouillets or our natural colored animals that have Rambouillet genetics. It's not that greasy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Interesting.
But I would say, in terms of softness, now the micron count, we don't micron count. And there's been times when I thought maybe I should do that, and I'm thinking it's okay. I'm happy with what I get, and I know that the micron count is between like 25 to 30 is what I remember
Mm-hmm.
reading.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's springy and soft, and that's what matters to me.
Right. Yeah, well, you already said your main criteria is staple length, which is a very legitimate
Hmm.
specification for a good spinnable fiber.
Yeah.
I just love the fact that you've got the freedom and the latitude
Hmm.
to breed for the kind of wool that you like. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? I just think
Yeah.
that's really great. And are you doing that? I mean, are you selecting ewes for fleece type? You mentioned some of
Um,
your older ewes are more boulder crimp and stuff like that.
Not necessarily the polypays. We select them more for their production.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now you got your merino flock that
Right.
you're going to send away.
And also the natural coloreds. Now, when you judge a natural colored animal at a national show and we used to show quite a bit when the guys were younger, when our kids were younger, and we do sometimes take animals to the state fair or to Nail, which is the sheep show in
Mhm.
Louisville.
Yeah,
We
right.
we have not done that in the last couple of years, but we used to quite a bit. And not the polypays, but we do take polypays to national shows back when they had them. But there's a fine fleece class and there's a medium fleece class, and so we breed for finer with that breed rather
Right.
than with the polypay.
Super
That's
interesting.
still mainly a production breed in our mind,
Yep.
and the wool is just kind of a bonus on my end. Yeah.
All right. So where are you going to be, Anne, in the next few months? What are your
Well,
plans?
thanks for asking. Gosh, I've just really lately in the last couple months have been involved with this group of spinners and weavers and fiber artists. And if anybody listening is familiar with the Wool and Fiber Arts Facebook
Yep.
sale group,
Yep.
I often am a vendor on that particular Facebook page. And I haven't for a couple months now simply because I've been super busy.
It's a big commitment. I've done it a couple times and I find it's pretty consuming.
It is a big commitment, but I do
Yeah,
love the community.
me
I
too.
didn't realize you were a vendor. I will have
Yeah.
to follow up and see if I can find your
It's been a long
information.
time. It's been about a year since my last live show, but it is
You know
really fun.
what? I think I do remember watching one of your
Oh,
shows.
really?
I'm making that connection now.
Oh,
That's so great.
oh,
That's
funny.
so great. And I will tell you this, this is something that I will share with you. People love that Polypay fiber because it's different.
Yeah.
You know, it's unusual. It's not a, it's not an exotic breed. It's not a rare breed, but in terms of acquiring the fiber, it may be because most people are commercial producers and they just send the wool to the pool, the wool pool. But so I do vend on that particular Facebook page once in a while. I won't be doing that until, later in the summer. Our oldest is getting married in May, and so I'm totally taking this spring off because we've got a lot to do.
Yeah.
But a couple friends and I have put together this great fiber camp or retreat or event in August. And so it's called Front Range Fiber Art Bash. And it's going to be in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I'm going to be teaching some weaving classes. So I teach beginning rigid heddle weaving because that's a really fun skill to teach. And then I also have this really great pattern that I love. It's called Log Cabin. And so I'm going to teach that too. And we just opened up registration this week. We just made
Oh,
the
really?
announcement. And so, yeah, it's pretty new. It just hit the press this week. And so I heard that I have one student so far. I'm pretty excited
Yay.
about
Well,
that. I know.
how many students can you handle? What's your capacity?
Well, I have my traveling loom show. I take my dog and pony show on the road, and so I have 10 looms, and I can have 10 students,
Okay.
unless, of course, you have your own loom and you just bring it.
Okay.
So
So I
it's
will be
kind
sure
of neat.
there will be a link in the comment section of this video with
Okay,
all of that information and links
okay.
also to you've got an Instagram, you've got a
I
Facebook,
do.
you have
I
a
do.
website where you're selling your fiber as
I
well.
do. I do.
Is
Yep.
lovely. And
Leaf.
then a link
Yeah,
to
our
this
farm
event.
page is called Leaf Livestock. And if there's any Polypay breeders that actually that will listen to this, we used to be known as Salmon's Polypay back in the day.
Okay. Do you have any Polypay up on your store right now?
Yes, I do. I
Okay.
have Polypay, and this is the thing too. I've had Polypay processed into comb to top by
Mhm.
Zeilinger Wool Mill in Michigan. I'm sure a lot of people know about Zeilinger, but I've also had it processed into roving and yarn, and I love spinning roving. I just love it. But I also this is a new deal. A mill that I connected with in southern Minnesota. She's just kind of starting out, and so we were just sharing ideas about how to process. And we are blending alpaca fiber with Polypay, and it is so fun to spin. And it gives it a really super cool color. It's the fawn alpaca that she
Okay.
blends in.
Okay. Do you
So
have that listed on your shop?
I think I'm out of that right now, but I
Oh,
have
really?
Polypay comb to top listed on my shop. Yep.
Okay, great. All right.
I
So we'll be sure to put a link to that as well.
Thanks.
Oh,
Awesome.
this has really been so helpful, so interesting. Because, when I first started with this, I was working at it from the mindset of, me being a breeder that's breeding for wool properties, very
Mhm.
specific and
Mhm.
very constrained, not in a bad way. Um, so this has just been really interesting and kind of liberating to think about another breed and the wool that they offer and
Mhm.
the value and the benefits that you can. So it's interesting to me too, the weaving aspect of it.
Mhm.
Do you think the Polypay, because of the staple length and maybe the higher micron, lends itself better to a weaving project versus other? Can you talk to that at all, or is that?
Sure. Yeah. It is more durable than
Mhm.
possibly Rambouillet. And it's, because I'm just thinking of the different breeds that we
Mhm.
raise. It's probably a little bit more durable because it's it's a little bit, I guess, or maybe not.
It's definitely
But
a
I
higher
do
micron
use,
than your merino. I don't know. Rambouillet is probably low 20s, typically the
yeah,
standard.
right. I haven't, and we don't micron count. But anyway,
Mhm.
but it's still soft enough.
Mhm.
So, next to skin soft. And I have woven, blankets out of it. And it's just,
Great.
and here's one thing that I haven't mentioned that would love for you guys to know. It takes dye beautifully.
Does
You know,
it?
yes. And, so I have Rambouillet being dyed and I have, Polypay being dyed and I have Columbia. We also raise Columbias. And the Polypay is just so vivid when it takes
Do
dye.
you have
It's
his
really pretty.
examples there? Did you?
You know what? This is just I don't even know if there's Polypay in the color, but this is I probably could find some, but this is I call it a bit bat, a little bit bat. And so what I'll do is I'll clean off my drum carder, and so all the colors from the drum carder, and there may be mohair in here, and there may be alpaca. There's just a variety, and so it's kind of like a heathered. Um, it's just fun. It's
Weedy
just
kind of. It's pretty.
Yeah, it's just a fun spin. And so I make those once in a while when I clean off my drum carder.
Nice.
But the way in which Polypay takes dye is really super. So people I think would really enjoy that.
Great.
Would
Well, that's
enjoy
good to
dyeing it.
know. That's important.
I think so. Yep, I do.
All right. Well, this has been really great, Anne. I appreciate your time and
You're
teaching us
welcome, of
about the bull
course.
side of the Polypay breed. And like I said, all the links will be down in the comments. And thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
So I'm ruining Lakshmi today. And as I was looking over her numbers and information, it occurred to me that she's a hidden gem in our flock. She's got a lot of great qualities, and we're going to go over them. And so while I'm ruining, we're going to talk about this very special ewe, Lakshmi. So she was born what year?
2018 she was born.
That makes her 4 years old.
She's older than that.
And she brews right to the skin. So what makes her special? First of all, her genetics, her background, the sheep that she's out of. So her parents are Oberon and Rosamond, right?
Yep. Rosamond was a fawn cat mulget. Oberon was a solid black. So that's why she's gray.
So we don't talk about either of those two sheep in terms of like being foundation sheep, right?
Yeah, so Oberon was out of Nitro and Pearl, who was a foundation
Those
sheep.
are the, yeah.
I don't remember. I remember Oberon being black and out of Pearl, but I don't remember that much about him or why we didn't have him anymore. We used them on some ewes. Nothing we didn't like about them. And Rosamond was out of Canterbury and Sienna. So Canterbury was very fine. He was in the 18 microns range. Sienna was, her mother was Cordanui, and she was very dense Shetland.
Sienna's
Not terribly fine.
oh, core, yeah.
But Sienna was out of Pompey Magnus and Cordanui, and she got fineness from him. So she retained the density of her mother and the fineness from her father. She was a pretty fine Shetland. And then Canterbury, as I said, was very fine. And then Rosamond was the outcome of that breeding that we did. And she's fine. And this one is dense.
This is a very dense
So
sheep.
this goes back to Sienna with the density. She didn't get it from anywhere else.
Well, Sienna had a nice body shape too, wasn't she? I mean, whenever I put up like the typical Shetland photo, I have one photo of Sienna, and she just looks beautiful. Very square.
Makes me wonder why we didn't breed. We probably did breed Nitro to Sienna. I just don't remember that. 'Cause it seems like that would have been a good option. We were trying to get Sienna finer. That was one of the things we were doing. Canterbury was finer than Nitro, but that's about the only thing that he had on him.
So she's got her grandparents are really the standout genetics for her. She's got the Canterbury, she's got the Pearl, she's got the Sienna, and Nitro. Those are all 4 that we've thought a lot of and used a lot.
Now Lakshmi has had several lambs. Susan B is a black lamb that's still in our farm. So what is she's a 2-year-old now. She's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And then Gertrude and Grayson. Grayson was a ram.
He's over at the farm in Connecticut. We sold him as breeding stock. He's a gray cat nugget.
So his spinning fineness was 17.1 and Gertrude is 17.2.
Yeah, I just brewed Gertrude's fleece, so she was a lamb last year.
What is she, gray or something?
She's gray as well, yeah.
So that's how you could see we gradually got finer. We started out with sheep that were a little bit on the coarse side, and through selective breeding we were able to get offspring from her that are even finer than her.
Because her spinning fineness, she's 4. What did we say? Her spinning fineness is 21.7. This one right here.
21.7, yeah.
Yeah.
Now of course she's 4, and Gertrude is only a yearling, so it's 17.2. May hold there, it may not. Usually it goes up a little, but sometimes it doesn't. We've been trying to breed so that it doesn't. We'll see what happens.
There's Lakshmi. There's little. So she's kind of a hidden gem. She doesn't, like, when you go out in the barn, she always figures out a way to get in behind everybody. She's kind of what I call her, the invisible ewe. And so she's not in the line of sight as much as some of the other ones. But, you know, as I was looking through her data, I was just like, what the heck? The fact that she's given us 2 ewes, I mean, that's a standout. Susan B, the black ewe we were talking about, she was a bottle lamb. So Lakshmi rejected her very early, right?
Yeah.
And
I don't remember the timing. I just remember it was weird how she was acting. We didn't notice it right away. But I would say within 24 hours she was not feeding it anymore.
so we brought her in the house and started bottle feeding her and stuff. And that's where we realized the reason, possibly the reason why she rejected her was because Susan B wasn't latching on. And when she would try to latch onto the bottle, she was like, it was irritating. And I could imagine, I don't know, it just seemed different from how lambs normally behave. And maybe Lakshmi.
Now she had a twin brother that year, and she
Yeah.
took care of her fine. So I don't know exactly what the reason was.
It's just weird how they kind of, the mothers, decide whether or not it's worth, you know, like they kind of have a sense for if the lamb's going to thrive or not, right?
Yeah, it seems that way.
So, what else I wanted to say about her? I mean, she's in good condition. She's, you know, great shape, and I don't know. I mean, we almost thought about selling her because of mothering instincts weren't good, but she did great with the next set of lambs she had, so.
As well as the ram that she had that same year.
Right. All right, so I'm just gonna keep working here. And because this one, so I usually only just do half. And then I'll finish her up another day.
She's not going to be real happy with you. I mean, we're down to the skin.
Yeah. So the thing with this is some of the ewes will rue and there's still wool on them. Others rue right down to the skin. I have found that when you rue them down to the skin, the wool comes back fairly quickly. So she'll have a nice layer of fur in the next couple weeks or so. You can tell sometimes when I rue and I hit the patch where we took a sample, you can see the new growth comes back in those patches sooner than the wool around them. So, and this is just part of the process. She's as comfortable as she would be as if she was getting sheared.
If she was getting sheared, she would have a little more wool left on her though.
Right.
But you're putting the coat back on her. So these coats, although they're not really provide warmth, they are like windbreakers, so they'll protect them from the wind and some light mist or rain.
And the sun too.
In the sun, it'll keep all that off of them, and it actually does work. You wouldn't think it would offer too much protection, but it does sort of trap in a little bit of heat too, it seems like. And I say that because they don't tend to sit there and shake like you would think they would do. And the sun protection is another big thing, because when you get this much wool taken off, they will get sunburned. The white ones are worse.
And I rooed Lakshmi last year, so that's another benefit of ruing. It's all pristine. There's no residual wool from last year's shearing, and I'm getting right down to the very base of the lock as nature intended. So. I usually will rue right to the point where the coat stops. And that's the premium fleece that's gonna go into the auction. The balance of the wool I'll rue later, and I'll decide if I wanna use that for comb top, or if I wanna process it myself in the case of the neck wool, or whatever.
We did CDTs on the pregnant ewes, but we didn't do anyone else.
Oh, see, here's the patch where I took the sample, where we did this one in February. And that's already started to grow back. It just grows back really fast. What is that? Another ewe had that too.
Probably from where we gave the CDT shots. Sometimes there'll be a little bump. I don't know why. It doesn't all the time.
It's just biting me. Alright, we're gonna peel this off. Pull the bag back a little bit. Okay. Silly girl. It's Saturday night, Shearing Eve, I guess we can call it. So yeah, it's the night before shearing, and we got everything taken care of that we can do today to prepare. So I just wanted to show you around. It's a little bit misty tonight, which is a good thing because we got the rams in the barn, so they're not going to be wet. The shearer is going to be here, Aaron, anywhere between 9 and 9:30, and I have a helper coming at 8:30, and she's going to help me rue the 3 rams that have the fleeces falling off them, which would be Frederick, Jon Snow, and Harry. So we're going to get the wool off of them. That'll go into comb top because it's going to just be a mess. And then we'll start shearing. So, all right, so let's go take a look and see how we've got everything set up. So one of the things that we do to set up to move animals now is we use this electronet, which is technically supposed to be used for, electric fencing, but it also creates a really nice lane that the sheep tend to follow. So all of my ram lambs that normally are living over there what do we got, 7 of them? They're now in the barn. So we got the barn kind of set up, and I also have the adult rams moved in here as well. So one of the challenges of having rams and ewes in the same barn is that the rams get very excited and stuff. So here's the girls now. I'm going to separate out the ruing and the shearing ewes for tomorrow. We're going to shear 40 sheep in total. I can't remember how many ewes that means. So these girls and all their wool are going to transform for our very eyes. Now I got the ram lambs in here. Hi guys. 4, 5, 6 plus Harry, who's a very sweet, gentle adult ram, so he doesn't really go in with the other adults because they're really mean to him. And he's gonna get rude tomorrow. These guys are not even in here, they're going at it. So they'll probably spend a day sheared in here just to get all their fight out of them, or hopefully anyways, we'll see. I can't get over there. The adult rams are in that pen over there, as far away as we could get them from the ewes. So this whole side of the barn is locked off now. This has all been cleaned. So we've scraped up all the loose stuff. Here's our piece of plywood, which we're using as a double purpose to block the ewes. Any additional barricade is helpful. So that's gonna floor for the shearer when he gets here. So I got 4 adults over there ready to go. So another thing that's good about the way we've got this set up is if the rams do manage somehow tonight to get out, which they won't. I even got this little barricade here. But if they do manage, we do have the camera set up that we'll be checking on them every so often. I think we'll be fine. So hopefully I can sleep tonight. I'm going to be pretty excited. You know, this is the big show, as they say, right? We're just, all of our hard work culminates in harvesting that wool from these beautiful sheep, and it's just so rewarding and exciting, and I'm really looking forward to it. So this is going to be a wrap for tonight's video for Sunday night, and then next week I'll have some footage of shearing day for you to watch. So wish us luck, and we'll see you later. Thanks.